I never thought the walls of my own home could feel so heavy. For 72 years, I have carried a secret so painful that it shaped every smile, every decision, and every sleepless night of my life. The people I loved most, the ones I raised, fed, and comforted, have no idea what really happened to me as a little girl, and the few times I tried to tell them, my words were brushed aside as if they were nothing more than a bad dream. Before I begin my story, let me know in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is. I just want to know I'm not alone in this, and if you feel moved by what you hear, consider subscribing. It helps more people become aware of the reality of elder abuse. Now let me tell you what really happened. The attic smelled of dust and old paper, a scent I'd known since childhood. I was sorting through boxes of winter coats when my hand brushed against a small, leather-bound book. Its faded pink cover was soft from years of hiding, but the lock on its side was still intact. I knew that diary as surely as I know the lines of my own palms. It was the journal I kept when I was 10 years old. For a long moment, I simply stared at it. My fingers trembled as I turned the tiny key that still dangled from a ribbon. Pages filled with a child's handwriting unfolded before me. My handwriting. Each entry was a whisper from the past. The nights I cried myself to sleep, the afternoons when my brother Sam would play games no child should ever endure. My heart thudded against my ribs as memories I had buried deep began to surface like unwelcome ghosts. That night, sitting alone at my kitchen table, I read every page until dawn. Every word carried the voice of a frightened little girl who had tried, again and again, to tell someone, anyone, what was happening. I had gone to my mother first, her apron still dusted with flour. But she pressed a finger to her lips and told me not to start trouble. When I tried my father, he only sighed and said, "Sam is your brother. He would never do such a thing." Decades later, I still remember the hollow ache of those moments. It wasn't only the abuse that broke me, it was the silence that followed. Now, with my health failing and time slipping away, the diary felt like a call I could no longer ignore. I knew I had to tell my children, Patty, who always took charge, Michael, quiet but observant, and Anna, my gentle youngest. They deserved the truth. But as I held the book to my chest, a question burned inside me: would they believe me any more than my parents once did? Shadows of the past had awakened, and for the first time in decades, I felt both terrified and strangely free. The next family dinner was only days away. I would have to decide whether to stay silent or finally speak the truth. The days leading up to that family dinner passed like a slow-moving storm. Every morning, I woke to the sound of the clock ticking in my quiet house, the pink diary resting on my bedside table like a silent companion. I'd open it, trace the faded ink of my 10-year-old handwriting, and close it again. My heart would pound so hard it felt as if it might burst. I rehearsed what I might say over and over in my mind. I have something important to share with you all tonight. But each time I imagined their faces. Patty's impatient frown, Michael's thoughtful but guarded eyes, Anna's nervous smile, my courage wavered. Dr. Jenkins had told me during our last session, "Ellie, truth can be frightening, but silence is a heavier burden. Speak for the little girl who had no one to listen." Her voice replayed in my head like a steady drumbeat. The night of the dinner arrived with the early autumn chill. The sky was streaked with fading gold as I set the table. The clink of silverware against porcelain echoed in the quiet kitchen, every sound sharpening my nerves. The front door creaked open, and the familiar chaos of my family filled the house. Patty swept in first, her heels clicking against the hardwood. "Mom, you should have let us bring dessert. You really shouldn't be doing all this cooking anymore," she said, her words sharp but coated in the sugar of concern. Michael followed, carrying a bottle of wine, his quiet presence a small comfort. Anna came last, her arms full of flowers, her soft hug lingering just long enough to remind me why I was doing this. Dinner began like any other. Talk of work, school, and the grandchildren's soccer games. I tried to smile to eat, but every laugh and passing comment blurred into a dull hum beneath the pounding of my heart. Finally, I placed my fork down and folded my trembling hands. "Before dessert," I began, my voice thin but steady, "I need to share something with all of you. Something about my past." The table fell silent. Patty's eyebrows lifted in irritation, while Michael leaned back slightly, sensing the weight of my words. Anna's eyes softened, encouraging. I reached into my bag and pulled out the small pink diary. Its worn cover seemed to glow under the dining room light. When I was a little girl, I continued, something happened to me. Something I tried to tell my parents about, but they didn't believe me. Patty's frown deepened. Mom, what is this about? Are you feeling okay? Her question sliced through me, a reminder of every dismissal I'd faced as a child. I steadied my breath. It was Sam, I said quietly, your uncle. He hurt me. And these pages, I opened the diary to the first trembling confession, are the proof. A sharp clatter echoed as Patty set down her glass too hard. This is ridiculous, she snapped. Sam was a child himself. He's been gone for decades. Why dredge up nonsense now? Michael looked stunned, his lips parting as if to speak, but no words came. Anna's hand reached across the table, gently covering mine. She whispered, I believe you. The room seemed to shrink around me. Patty's eyes flashed with anger, Michael remained frozen, and Anna's quiet support was the only lifeline keeping me from drowning in the silence. I took a shaky breath and whispered, I'm not asking for permission to tell my story. I'm asking you to hear me. But Patty stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I won't sit here and listen to lies about our family. Dad would be heartbroken if he were alive to hear this. With that, she stormed out, leaving a trail of cold air and broken trust behind her. I sat back, the diary still open before me. My secret was no longer hidden, but neither was the pain of not being believed. The house was painfully quiet after everyone left. I stood in the doorway long after Patty's car lights disappeared into the night, my fingers pressed to the edge of the doorframe. The echoes of raised voices still clung to the walls, sharp and heavy like smoke after a fire. I walked back to the dining room and stared at the table we had shared only an hour ago. The plates were half empty, the wine glasses smudged with fingerprints. But it was the empty chair where Patty had sat that seemed to loom largest. My heart ached with a mixture of grief and relief. Grief for the daughter who had turned away. Relief that the words were finally out of my mouth. Michael lingered for a few minutes after Patty's stormy exit. He had helped Anna clear the dishes, but he said little, his eyes distant. Mom, he finally murmured, I don't know what to say. That's all right, I whispered. Just think about it. He nodded silently and left, leaving me alone with Anna. Anna stayed behind until the last dish was washed. When the kitchen was clean, she turned to me, her eyes brimming with quiet understanding. Mom, I believe you, she said again, her voice firm. Patty, she's scared of what this means for all of us. Tears welled in my eyes. I'm scared too, but silence is silence nearly killed me once. I won't let it win again. Anna hugged me tightly, the kind of embrace that says more than words ever could. You're not alone anymore, she whispered. That night, I barely slept. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying every word, every look of disbelief. The pink diary rested on my nightstand, its presence both comforting and heavy. By morning, the ache in my chest had hardened into a strange clarity. Whether my children chose to believe me or not, I had spoken the truth. That was mine to keep, no matter their reaction. I decided to call Dr. Jenkins. Her warm voice answered on the second ring. Ellie, I was hoping to hear from you, she said, as though she had been waiting. I told them. I managed, my throat tight. My children. Patty, she left. She called me a liar. There was a pause, the kind that feels like a soft hand on your shoulder. Ellie, I am so proud of you. Their reactions belong to them, not to you. You've taken the first step toward healing. Her words steadied me. For the first time, I began to understand that telling the truth wasn't about forcing others to believe. It was about freeing myself. Later that week, Anna stopped by with a small bouquet of sunflowers. I've been thinking, she said as we sipped tea at the kitchen table. Maybe it's time to share your story with people who will listen. People who know what it's like. I frowned. You mean strangers? Not strangers. Survivors. There's a support group at the community center. You don't have to speak if you're not ready. Just come and see. The thought terrified me. For decades, I had locked my pain away like a shameful secret. The idea of speaking it aloud to a room full of people who might understand, felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. But a quiet voice inside me whispered, this is the way forward. I agreed to attend the next meeting. That night, as I prepared for bed, I placed the diary back in my bag. The same bag I had carried to the family dinner. It no longer felt like a burden. It felt like a key. One that might open a door I had been afraid to even knock on. I didn't know if Patty would ever forgive me, or even believe me. But for the first time in my life, I felt the faintest glimmer of hope. The community center smelled faintly of coffee and floor polish. I stood at the entrance, clutching my bag with the pink diary inside, my palms damp with sweat. Anna walked beside me, her presence steady and warm. "You don't have to speak," she reminded me softly. "Just listen. That's enough for today." The meeting room was small, with folding chairs arranged in a loose circle. A few people sat quietly, some staring at the floor, others offering gentle smiles. A sign on the wall read, "Survivors Circle, a safe place for every story." A woman with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair greeted us. "Welcome, I'm Marjorie," she said. "We're glad you're here." Her voice carried no judgment, only an invitation to breathe. Anna squeezed my hand before taking a seat beside me. My heart pounded as introductions began. One by one, people shared small pieces of their lives. Fractured childhoods, painful marriages, the long road to healing. No one rushed, no one doubted. Every word was met with quiet nods and understanding. When it came to me, I hesitated. My throat felt tight, as if years of silence were fighting to stay inside. "I'm Ellie," I finally said. "This is my first time here." Marjorie's smile was gentle. "Take your time, Ellie. We're here to listen whenever you're ready." I thought of the little girl who once tried to tell her parents, of the woman who had sat through decades of family gatherings pretending everything was fine. The diary in my bag felt like a heartbeat. My voice cracked. I was hurt by someone in my family when I was a child. My parents didn't believe me. And now some of my children don't believe me either. The words trembled into the air, fragile but unmistakably real. Across the circle, an older man nodded slowly. A young woman wiped a tear from her cheek. Marjorie leaned forward, her eyes warm. "Ellie, thank you for trusting us. What happened to you is not your fault. Your truth matters here." Something inside me shifted. For the first time, I wasn't met with disbelief or dismissal. I was met with compassion. After the meeting, several people came to me quietly. One woman, maybe in her 40s, whispered, "I told my family too." They didn't believe me at first either. But speaking it's the first step. Her words wrapped around me like a soft blanket. I left the center that evening feeling lighter than I had in years. Anna walked beside me as we headed to the car. "You were so brave, Mom," she said, her eyes shining. "I don't feel brave," I admitted, though a small warmth glowed in my chest. "I just feel heard." That night, back in my bedroom, I opened the diary once more. But this time the words of my 10-year-old self no longer felt like chains. They felt like a bridge, connecting the frightened child I once was to the woman I was finally becoming. I whispered into the quiet room, "I hear you now. And I believe you." The next morning, my phone buzzed with a message from an unexpected number. It was Michael. "Mom, I've been thinking a lot about what you said. Can we talk?" I stared at the screen, my heart leaping. Maybe, just maybe. The walls of silence in my own family were beginning to crack. Michael arrived the next afternoon, the autumn air crisp and sharp as fallen leaves crunched beneath his shoes. I met him at the door, the pink diary clutched in my hands like a fragile treasure. He gave me a small, hesitant smile, the kind that said he had been thinking, wrestling, questioning. "Hi, Mom," he said quietly. "Can we sit for a while?" We settled in the living room, the soft ticking of the old grandfather clock filling the silence between us. Michael leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his gaze fixed on the floor. "I couldn't stop thinking about what you told us," he began, his voice low but steady. At first, I didn't know how to process it. Uncle Sam, he was always this distant figure to me. And you. He paused, looking up with eyes filled with something between confusion and sorrow. "You've always been the strongest person I know. I guess I never imagined something like that could happen to you." My throat tightened. "I never imagined it either," I said softly. "But it did. And it changed everything about the way I grew up. The way I raised you kids, even the way I loved your father." Michael's brow furrowed. "Dad never knew." "No," I whispered. "I was too afraid. By the time I met your father, I thought silence was the only way to survive. But the silence eats at you, Michael. It never stops. He sat back, his shoulders sinking as he let my words settle. I want to believe you, he said finally. It's just hard. Not because of you, but because it means everything we thought we knew about our family was wrong. I reached out, placing the diary gently on the coffee table between us. This is what I wrote when I was 10. It's not easy to read, but it's the truth. You don't have to believe every word today. Just take it with you. Let it speak for itself. Michael hesitated, then picked up the diary. His hands lingered on the worn cover as if he could feel the weight of the years inside. I'll read it, he said finally. I promise. Tears pricked my eyes. That's all I ask. Just read it. Before leaving, Michael hugged me, longer and tighter than he had in years. I'm sorry you carried this alone for so long, he whispered. I'm sorry we didn't see it. His words pierced something deep inside me, not with pain but with a fragile hope. Perhaps the silence was breaking, one heart at a time. That evening, Anna called to check on me. I told her about Michael's visit, and she let out a relieved sigh. That's a big step, Mom. Maybe Patty will come around too in her own time. I hesitated. I don't know if she ever will. Maybe, Anna said gently, but that doesn't have to stop you from healing. Later, as the house settled into its usual nighttime quiet, I sat in my armchair by the window, the moonlight spilling across the floor. For the first time in decades, I felt a small but steady warmth in my chest, like a candle flickering in a long, dark room. I wasn't fully believed, not yet, but I was no longer invisible. The next morning brought another message, this time from Patty. Mom, I need some time. But I want to talk eventually. I read the words twice, my heart trembling. They weren't forgiveness, and they weren't acceptance, but they were a beginning. The church basement was warm and softly lit, the smell of brewed coffee mingling with the faint scent of candles. Anna walked beside me, her hand resting lightly on my arm as we entered the room. Tonight wasn't just another support group. Tonight I had agreed to share my story publicly as part of a community awareness event. My heart thudded like a drum as we stepped onto the small stage. A modest crowd of neighbors, parents, and community leaders filled the folding chairs. Their faces were kind, but the sight of so many strangers waiting to hear me speak made my throat tighten. Marjorie, the group facilitator, gave me an encouraging nod. Whenever you're ready, Ellie. I took a deep breath, gripping the edge of the podium. My name is Ellie Matthews, I began, my voice trembling but audible. And for 72 years, I carried a secret I believed I would take to my grave. A hush fell over the room. I continued, each word slow but steady. I told them about the attic, the pink diary, and the frightened 10-year-old girl who had tried again and again to tell her parents that her own brother was hurting her. I spoke of the silence, the dismissal, and the lifelong ache of not being believed. At my age, I said, pausing to meet a few eyes in the crowd, people expect you to have found peace. But peace doesn't come from time passing. It comes from truth. And tonight, I am finally free. The room stayed silent for a long heartbeat. Then warm, steady applause began to fill the space. It wasn't loud or wild, but it carried something deeper, understanding. I felt Anna's hand squeeze my shoulder as tears pricked my eyes. For decades I had been defined by secrecy and fear. Now, standing before a room of compassionate strangers, I felt the heavy weight lift, leaving in its place a quiet, radiant light. After the event, several people approached me. A young mother with tearful eyes hugged me tightly. Your story, it gives me courage, she whispered. An older man pressed my hand and said, thank you for reminding us that truth matters, no matter how late it comes. Among the faces in the crowd, I suddenly spotted someone I hadn't expected, Michael. He stood near the back, his expression soft and contemplative. When our eyes met, he gave me a small, steady nod. No words, just a look that said, I believe you now. Later that evening, Michael found me by the refreshment table. Mom, he said quietly, I finished the diary. I'm so sorry. For everything. For not listening right away. My breath caught. You believe me? He nodded, his eyes glistening. Completely. And I'm proud of you. I felt my knees weaken as years of loneliness dissolved into a wave of relief. Michael pulled me into a hug, and for the first time in decades, I felt the kind of safety I had once thought impossible. On the drive home, Anna smiled through tears. You did it, Mom. You're helping so many people just by speaking. I looked out at the quiet streets, the moonlight spilling across the windshield. For the first time, I said softly, I feel like I can breathe. That night, as I sat in my armchair by the window, the pink diary rested on the table beside me. It no longer felt like a burden or a wound. It felt like a badge of survival, a reminder of the girl who refused to disappear and the woman who finally found her voice. Tomorrow, I would call Patty. Whether she believed me or not was no longer the point. The truth was out, and it belonged to me. The morning sun spilled gently across my living room, painting the walls with soft gold. I sat in my favorite armchair, the pink diary resting on the table beside a steaming cup of tea. For the first time in decades, my chest felt light, no invisible hands pressing against my ribs, no dark secret clawing at the edges of my mind. I had spoken my truth, not just to my children but to the world, and I was still standing. Later that week, the phone rang. Patty's name appeared on the screen. For a moment I hesitated, my hand trembled as I answered. Mom. Her voice was cautious, softer than I'd heard in years. Yes, Patty. I'm here. There was a pause, the kind that carries 1,000 unsaid words. I've been thinking, she said at last, about what you told us. I'm not ready to understand everything, but I don't want this to break us. Tears blurred my vision. You don't have to understand right now, I said gently. You only need to know that what I shared is true, and that I love you, no matter what. Another long pause. Then, quietly, I love you too, Mom. The call ended without promises of full reconciliation, but for the first time, I heard no anger in her voice, only the faint sound of a door beginning to open. In the days that followed, messages from strangers began to arrive. Some had heard me speak at the community event, others had watched the recording shared online. Survivors of all ages wrote to say that my story gave them courage to share their own. Each message felt like a ripple reaching outward, proof that even the smallest voice can move the stillest waters. Anna visited often, her gentle laughter filling the house with warmth. Michael called every evening, sometimes just to talk about nothing at all, and though Patty remained careful with her words, she began sending pictures of the grandchildren again. Small steps, but steps nonetheless. One quiet evening, I carried the pink diary to the attic where I had first found it. I set it on a small shelf and rested my hand on its worn cover. Thank you, I whispered to the little girl who had once written these pages in secret. You kept me alive when no one else would listen. And now you can rest. I didn't lock the diary away this time. I left it in plain sight, a testament rather than a burden. As I returned downstairs, the night air drifted through the open window. I sat in my armchair and let the soft breeze wash over me. For the first time in 72 years, the silence in my house no longer felt like loneliness, it felt like peace. I smiled, a faint, knowing smile, and whispered to the quiet room, I am free.